I don't know if it's that we always show adults reading longer books, but there's a lot of chapter books out that are really kind of drippy, that you don't even really want them read. It's like a chapter book. And now where there's a buck to be made, just watch out for marketing, because there's also chapter books that are 8 pages long. I read a chapter book the other day that had 17 words in it. The whole book was 17 words. But this little kid was like, but it's a chapter book. So I don't know what that's about, but let's collectively try to keep that tempered down a little bit and figure out how to help kids navigate that. I'm imagining its origin is that they see grown-ups reading longer books. You know, I don't know. My mother, I remember as a kid, my mother read the same book, I think, for like 5 years. Because she was so exhausted, but she knew you're supposed to show that you're supposed to read. And I swear to God, she would start a page and it was out. Like, I think it was this, and I told her that this past month, it's just not the truth. I don't think it ever changed. I think it was a good demonstration of reading. But I don't think she actually read anymore. So we're going to talk about what that means. And what that means, for me, I'm wearing my mom hat. My kids are 8 months and 6. I have a first grader and a third grader. But I'm also going to be wearing my educator hat and sort of jumping back and forth. So we're going to do some of this, what I'm calling high quality reading work, to sort of set the stage for what is it, be it your kid is 5 or 10. Sitting here, we have parents of a little person who started to read and crack code because it's brain science and neurology. Throwing a little Sesame Street too. But some kids crack the code early, so you've had kids who are technically reading or cracking the code at 3 and a half. You have some kids who are 7 and it's still coming together for them. You have kids who you hang out with and raise and call your own who absolutely love reading. And you have some parents sitting here going, my kid hates books. And I'm not sure if I'm supposed to admit that in front of all these people. You have the entire, right, got a book hater right there. Admitting it, not a crowd. Girl or boy? Okay, who's raising a boy who doesn't particularly love reading? Yeah, even though I'll mention it later, if you haven't been, go to guysread.com. It's a great site, obviously set up for, trying to make sure that that gender still finds reading important. Here's the other thing I'm going to say to you before we get too much further. I get that, it seems like a nice thing to say to kids, you need to love reading. We try to do that with our little ones in our households and so on and so forth, but the bottom line is, not every kid is the life reader in the way that defines them, right? You all have a friend who's more the reader, but your kids, some of you have an engineer, and some of you have a potter, and some of you have a firefighter, and some of you have a baker, and some of you have a mother. They're who they are, right? So I want to make it really clear that the goal for me is not that every kid loves reading, because I don't think that's honest, but they have to be really good at it, and that's no joke. And I make that really clear to kids, from the peanuts all the way up through middle school. Guys, reading isn't all of your thing, okay? We know that it's Stephanie's thing. She walks into walls. Like, we know that that's her thing. It doesn't have to be your thing, but you must be good at it. See, lacrosse, say that doesn't have to be your thing, and you don't have to be good at it. Everyone has to be good at reading, because it's a door closer if you're not in too many other arenas. And they're like, oh, all right. And then once you take that thing away, right, and you say, so let's just get good at it. It doesn't have to be your thing. It takes the pressure off. Then the bottom line is, once kids are really good at it, they actually really like it. It's the getting good at it part that we're going to talk about, high quality reading work and what that actually means, which is not blowing through books and having an opinion, or blurbify reading, which is reading the back and saying, I know what's going to happen, I get to it, yes I do, I get to the end and it's over. Reading, when it actually is successful, makes an impact on people. Reading makes an impact on you. Maybe it's like a painting does, or maybe it's like a piece of music does. But reading, when actually done right. I'm not sure if this is, I don't know if this works, but I'll come back and forth. Do you know if this works? It is. I just tapped it. Let me try again. I actually tapped it. No worries. It's just not that vast a space. I can trudge through. So this is my definition of reading. When reading is engaging, I don't care if you're 4 or 44, it's a call to action. And this is really what I share with kids in classrooms all the time and with parents everywhere. It's a call to action. Most human and raw is emotional, right? So you have an emotional reaction to a book that saddens you, or you're elated by it, or you're confused by it, but there's emotional reaction. And then there's intellectual action. And you're like, well, my kid's like 5. Intellectual action is any kind of grappling, pondering, a new opinion, a new perspective. It doesn't have to be outside of what is appropriate for a little person, because you should decide what's appropriate for your little person, right? So some families talk about things later or sooner than other families, and that's not our, like, I don't want teachers broaching subjects with kids, telling them definitively how to feel about certain things. That's your job. But what we would like is when things are presented and they come up, that your kids are really present. They're just very present and participatory. And this is the kind of reading that makes that happen, and that kind of presence also perpetuates. So when your kids are emotionally engaged, that's pretty human. It's almost like hard not to be. Although, depending, you know, some of you are getting toward the 5th grader, almost like middle school, like, that's like, you know, they're starting to change into that middle school brain. Have you guys followed those studies in the towns that are flipping middle school and elementary school times? Isn't that just, why doesn't everybody do it? Why do we have to decide? Just do it. The 6-year-olds are awake at 5 o'clock. The middle school kids, what? They don't even have a pulse about it. They go into hibernation mode until like 10, maybe, right? I don't know why we even have to vote on that. Just flip it. So any case, this is what I'm saying. Intellectual action is just, to me, when a little person is involved in just kind of going, huh. See, one of the dying habits of mind in our society, very unfortunately, is the habit of mind of pondering. Kids who ponder and just wonder, because society isn't really a pondering society anymore. We're fast, right? Where are the learned people around tables? They're thinking of the next goal, and everything's fast. Many, many studies, I'm sure you guys know of the marshmallow study, done in the 70s, revisited in the New York Times last year, putting kids in a room, if you don't know it, putting a kid in a room with a marshmallow on a table, saying, that marshmallow is all yours. You can have it. And you can have it anytime you want. If you eat it right away, then that's the only marshmallow you're going to have, and that's fine. But if you actually don't eat it, if you're able to not eat it, then there's like 5 more marshmallows, okay? This study has been tracked longitudinally to really look at the kids who can not eat the marshmallow, longitudinally prove to be very, very successful in their pursuits, because it's about 2 very important things in habits of mind in any pursuit that you take on. It's about delayed gratification, which in today's society is kind of just an interesting concept, but it's about delayed gratification, and it's also about the willingness to not have the answer right away, okay? So it's engineers or scientists, people who are willing to just go, huh. So when we're talking around books in classrooms, and when I have children go, I got it, it's me, I know. And I'm just like, okay. But some other people have another it, and let's just think for, it really is. It's a habit of mind that's incredibly important. So when I say intellectual engagement, that's all I'm talking about. Whether you're 4 or whether you're 12, it's about that willingness to just go, you know, I don't know if I trust that guy, actually. I mean, you guys are saying that you think he's this, I'm not sure. I'm not disagreeing, I'm just, huh. That's really important. A lot of the reading work that we do when we're reading aloud with your kids, and I'm going to talk about that, is also work that translates into mathematical reasoning and processing and scientific reasoning and processing. So although this is a reading type of parent workshop, it really is a lot more than that. In many of my schools, when we get kids doing this kind of reading, math scores go up. You get kids doing this kind of reading, science scores go up without ever touching those things in any kind of reform way. Does that make sense to you? Because it's kids' willingness to ponder and grapple and defend ideas and take in information and actually engage in some kind of constructing of meaning together. So that's really what we say. Now, when reading works, hopefully books make an impact on kids, and their view of the world has changed. Now, that means my mommy, if that's their world, my daddy, it could be my siblings, my grandmother, it could be my friends, it could be my neighborhood. Depending on how old your kid is and then how you raise your child, it could be larger society, global society, it depends on who your kid is. But after a reading experience, what we're hoping is it's not just that was good, right? So what we're hoping is, you know, that book really kind of left me thinking about blah, 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 lingering impact, okay? Lingering impact is what we're really talking about. Are you going to be my person? You're going to be my Vanna? All right, I love that. All right. So I can't do anything. When I teach people to write, and I teach teachers and children to write, teach people to read all the time. So we have to do whatever it is that we're going to talk about. So we're going to take 5 minutes to read something. Don't pretend to be a kid. Just read it as a grown-up. Don't be nervous. I'm not going to share this with your 6-year-old. But we're just going to read a short text. It's called About Loving, and it's actually from a book called, and you'll see the next slide. Oops. Hey world, here I am. No problem. And it's just called About Loving. We're just going to read it together. One big thing that we have to get right, if we get it right with our readers, is that books don't have right answers, okay? Books don't have right answers. Books have accurate information that kids need to retrieve in order to defend their answer and their interpretation. Are you with me? So you have to be right, but it's not really right. It's accurate. So you and I could read this piece. Someone's going to think these parents are awesome, and someone's not going to think these parents are awesome, because it's about the bag of tricks you bring to a book, right? Same thing with little kids. I'm going to share some books that I read with kindergartners, 5th graders, 7th graders. Some kids will say, that was an awesome decision. I totally admire it. Right next to them on the rug, you are hoping, if it's not the answer right culture, that another kid goes, are you crazy? What? What a cowardly decision. How could you admire that? And then what comes up is not only who they are and who you are, but what comes up is accurate retrieval of the information on the page, but to support a wide array of answers. Don't you remember, I know you remember, the dreaded time in either high school or college when you actually started to interpret either poetry or something in a way that felt like, hey, I'm getting this. And then your teacher said, wrong answer. Don't you remember? It's like, yeah, I really think that this poem is about blah, blah, blah. No, wrong. It's like, oh, okay, oops. It's like it shuts down interpretation. Books don't have right answers. They have human interpretations. It's just like paintings. Kids have to accurately retrieve applicable information from their own lives and from the text in order to be participatory. So let's read About Loving. It's by Jean Little, and I promise I will not ask you, what are the 3 things her mom brought her? Because that's just not hard, okay? And that's not what you want your kids worried about. So go ahead. About Loving. When you're done, just do some jotting, think about those questions on your own, and then I'll kind of signal the group to chat with someone next to you inside some of these questions or just your own reactions and responses. By the way, Catherine is 12 years old. In the context of the book, she's 12. Where am I putting it? Do I aim it that way? And then back. Perfect. Thanks. Should I try not to move so much for you? I forgot that you're taping me. I'm a mover. I'm sorry. Okay. As you finish it and you take a look at those questions, what you're going to see is that they're personal. They're not definitive as if there is one answer. What would you say? How would you describe? And that's the kind of work we need our kids doing, not describe. And it's very subtle, but it makes all the world of a difference because it doesn't mean that there's a right answer. I'm not going to tell you whether or not I think this family is great or not great. What I'm going to do is engage your kids and get your teachers to engage your kids in the conversations and the debates to have their own presence and interpretation of who this family is. So you're reading this right now because it's human. You're reading it either as a child or, you know, an adult child with parents. You might be thinking through the parent lens. Everyone, you know, we're all complex people. So you're thinking about this in a number of different ways. For some of you, this piece is very much like your family. For some of you, it's not at all like your family. And all of that dictates what it means to you and your interpretation of the piece. So to expect our kids to have right answers is basically shutting them off emotionally. Because what one kid really felt was, you know, I really admire these parents. But if my grown-up interpretation is, aren't they horrible? The kid's like, oh, okay. I thought I admired them, but I guess they're horrible. And if they don't feel present and saying, challenging and making their own opinion, they shut down. And then here's what kids start to become. Kids who do school, not kids who truly read and interpret and analyze. I was a kid who could do school. Any of you? I knew how to find the answer. I had no emotional connection to almost anything I was reading. I could get the answer. Give me the thingy, tell me what to go. Good, now more time for me to do what I want to do. And I did really well at that. I could do school. I don't think I was a reader, though, not by that definition I showed you earlier. Do you see what I'm saying? All right, so talk to someone next to you. Who's this family? Who are they? What are your thoughts about them? You're going to have very different opinions based on who you are. Anchor it in the evidence from the text. You know, I think this couple's amazing because blah, blah, blah. This family's a disaster because, look, it doesn't matter. There's no right answer. Who you are and information in the text. Talk to someone next to you. Who's this family? How would you describe Catherine? Try to maybe just turn around and find someone near you if you guys can. Same work. Same work. Take another 30 seconds. Start to wrap up your conversation. These books take me a week to read. 2 pages, and the kids are like, all right. Look at the high quality reading work. My God, I can't even stop them. They're like quoting a text, you're gonna highlight it back there. All right, so let's come together. You have a cafe. This building is beautiful. You can continue your analysis of Catherine and her family when we complete our time together at 11. It's a great piece. It's a great piece to help us understand as adult readers the same quality and that definition of reading that we want for our little kids, which is, can you imagine me saying, you know, what are the 3 things Catherine's mom brought for her? So we just want to be really careful that, you know, material doesn't define for kids what high quality reading is. You could talk about this and debate this piece forever because it's about who you are.
What age group is it for?
Oh, well, I used this for you. I used this in kindergarten now. It's a collection of shorts. It's actually a mock writer's notebook. The character is 12. So in general, the character's age kind of dictates who should read it. Some of the pieces I've used with like third graders, some of the pieces really aren't appropriate. You know, there's a number of pieces where the kids like, the mom and the daughter get really close, almost like the mom is too close with her. The kid's like, I don't really want your stuff dumped on me a little bit. Like, some of it's a little intense. So I would pick part and parcel. But it's a good rule of thumb. The character's 12, so then 10 to 11, depending on who the 10-year-old is, you know? You have to know your kid. So now, let's take that same rigorous work to Katie did it. Okay, because here's the deal. Text level does not define rigor. And here's my bumper sticker. Not really, but it would be a good one to have. Wouldn't you be like, oh my God, that's a little, it's kind of weird. I met a math lady whose entire car is decorated in math. I was like, wow, it's like a little too far for me. But here's a really cool bumper sticker. Rigor need not negate joy, and joy need not negate rigor. That is one of my educational just sort of platforms, is that they are symbiotically connected. Kids who are busy are having a good time. Kids who are working hard are having a good time. Kids who are having a good time are usually working hard, contrary to what they think. That's the truth. That's when school is really working. So now some would say, oh, Katie did it, little first grade book. I mean, what's the kind of work they're going to be able to do with this in a conversation that we just had? That kind of rigorous reading is not something that we hold out for 10-year-olds to do. But what we want to do is make sure that the busyness and the grappling and the pondering and the debate happens from kindergarten all the way up. It's just, it doesn't have to be provocative and compelling. You know, you don't need a 5-year-old doing that work around family dynamics and intimacy. And do you really think this marriage is healthy? You know, that would be a little weird. But here's Katie did it. And this book goes like this. It's not a first grade book. Katie was little. She's one of 3 siblings. Her brother Chris was bigger, and her sister Jenny was even bigger. Now, if I'm reading this with your kids, we stop right there. Hey guys, who's got this kind of situation? So what do you think? Does it work for you? Does it not? I'll hear immediately from one kid, are you kidding me? Being the baby is the best. I get away with everything. Someone else will say, no, well, for me, it's not so great, because I feel like they're always off and going, debate, debate, debate. And now we bring it back to this little kid and how she's feeling. This book, I've read 2 pages. So now, because of them and who they are, we're having this interesting conversation about birth order, but they don't know that, really. We're just talking about family dynamics. Whenever milk was spilled, Chris and Jenny said, Katie did it. Whenever a bowl was left out, Chris and Jenny said, Katie did it. When the lights was left on, Chris and Jenny said, Katie did it. Stop right here. Here's a big debate. Guys, what are you thinking about that? You thinking kind of like mean, or kind of like just what brothers and sisters do? And here's what I'm not going to say. What do you think about that? That they're always blaming her. Because clearly, that just becomes body language analysis, and they're going, I was kind of thinking it was funny, but now I'm going with sad, because you're the tall person, and you fill out my report card. So, but that is a question. That is a question, even as an adult reader of this book right now. Are they just being kids? Isn't that just what brothers and sisters do? Or is that not what all brothers and sisters do? And is that actually pretty mean? You know, I mean, is that just siblings? How many of you think that's just siblings? That's what they do. See, you're just like your. Some of you are like, I don't. Did someone else? It's kind of both. It's both. It's just siblings, but eventually you're like, knock it off. All right. In some families, that would not be acceptable. The point is, we're just analyzing. Here's information we're taking in, and we're doing stuff with it, okay? And this is certainly not provocative and compelling, but what they are going to be doing is stopping, grappling, emoting, pondering. They might leave this book with a new perspective. You might have another younger sibling who leaves this book going, you know what? All right, so it's just life. And their whole stance when their older siblings get squishy like that with them is like, because books should make an impact on them. Right? That's really when we're getting it right. So when the door was left open, Jenny and Chris said, Katie did it, Katie did it, Katie did it. That was all Katie heard. That day, Mommy called Jenny. Now, let's imagine, here's what they're all going to want to do. Predict. Be careful when you're reading with your kids and when they're reading. Prediction is kind of just, again, the race forward, right? So every time, instead of saying what will, hey guys, what do you think will happen? Change will to should. Guys, what do you think should happen here? Totally different question. Get it? What do you think will happen? Half the class, they're going to get in trouble. someone's gonna be right, someone's gonna be wrong. Change it to should. Guys, what should happen here? I mean, should the grown-ups get involved or not? What do you think? Yes, no, well my mom would, well my dad would say, and now we have a huge debate. This book is probably beginning of first grade in its level of material. It's the reading work that kids bring to a text that make it rigorous or not. I work with fourth graders for whatever reason, all can be hypothesized about, that are reading this, okay? This is what they read. This is what works for them right now. And guess what? They're doing some really good work with it. They're like, you know what? She needs to just like not worry about it. Or maybe the mom should get involved earlier. I mean, she seems a lot younger than the kids. It's about the reading work that kids are doing. So whether you bring that to some, level triple Z fantasy text that someone's going to buy the movie rights to tomorrow before your kid finishes the book, or whether it's this text, it's about rigorous reading work. It's about helping kids define that reading makes an impact. And you know what Katie did? At the very end it says, Katie did it, Katie did it, Katie did it. That's all she heard. That day, Mommy called Jenny, Chris, and Katie inside. She asked, who gave me the pretty flowers? And do you know what Katie did? Katie said, Katie did it. All right. So even that, it's kind of a weird ending, sort of. It doesn't address the whole sibling thing. Like, isn't that kind of a weird ending? But I would have kids analyze it. Guys, what's with the flowers? Well, she probably always thinks that she's in trouble. She's trying to get her mom to really, what do you mean? Doesn't her mom love her anyway? This is what happens with these books. This. So, no, I'm not going to tell you what to tell your kid to read. I will tell you that in classrooms, because we have batteries of tests and all kinds of ways to analyze the level of material they should be reading to make nice gains in high quality reading, what they'll probably have to have in their hands in school. The best we can do is try not to make that a beef for kids. Do you know what I mean? You cannot picture who I am and my children are in school. I am the nicest parent though. Do you know my kids even out me as an educator for years? I was just outed this year. And you can imagine the things I have seen with this expertise in my brain. And I'm just like, that's great. Here's some markers. Donate them to the Writing Center. I don't want that conflict for them. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't. So what I think is, what I tell my teachers is, you're not going to tell a parent what to put in their kid's hand. But then what we also have to agree on is you have to trust us to know what has to be in their hands to make this high quality gradual growth. But you know what? For all kinds of reasons, social reasons, my big sister reasons, my cousin's coming, because my mom reads it, and even though it's bigger than me, I want to read what my mom reads. Who knows what it is? There's stuff that makes them want books in their hands. One of the biggest reasons that if we get this right we can stop is they associate complex material with intellectual challenge. Are you with me? The material, if we get it right, need not have to be the complexity. The reading work and what they do should be the complexity. And then eventually, yeah, they should. But I see it all the time. I saw a little tiny peanut, probably wore size 2T. She was the teeniest fourth grader I ever saw. And she was reading, what's the new Harry Potter, everybody? Come on. The kill children and kill each other, the Hunger Games. Okay. So there's the new, all right, whatever. Whatever you think about it, whatever. It's the latest phenomenon. I happen to think it's a little twisted for an 8-year-old, but hey, if you're her mom, have at it, right? She didn't know that they were dying. I was like, child did not know that they were killing each other. She was reading the Hunger Games. Not in my classroom on my watch, but that's what she's reading at home. Didn't know they were dying. So another kid was like, isn't that kind of sad that they're all like dying? She's like, they're not dying. They get sick and then that thing comes and takes them. I was like, ooh, okay, moving on. Anyway, here's Katie did it, and let's get busy, shall we? So anyway, they should have a variety of materials in their hands, right? But that dialogue is just something that we want to continue. So what I want to do now, I want to jump out of this, what is high quality reading? I'm going to give you a quick window into what happens in our classrooms, super quick, like just a quick window. And then back to how you teach your kids stuff. And then back to some of this, what can I be doing with this kind of book? Reading a novel with your kids is a big commitment. Life is busy, right? I call these books with older kids short stories that someone painted. And they're like, oh, cool, I love short stories. Collection of short, they read that in middle school, right? Yes. But someone took this short story and they added paintings to it. Oh, cool. Call it a picture book, and it may as well have skunk spray on it. You're not touching it. This is not appropriate for little children. This is about World War II Denmark, when Jews obviously were segregated and made to stand out by wearing stars. And although this has never been fully proven, and it's considered a myth, it's also very much considered true, that the leader of the nation of Denmark said, then everyone in my country will wear a star. Who wants to read that to their first grader? Okay. But you see this? That's a picture book. Now, who's going to read it? Your kid's not going to pick it up if we don't get it right. But that's a conversation you as a family would probably want to have with your kid, right? Like, that's a biggie. I'm not going to tell kids when they should learn about, but if we read this, however they come to the table is how they come to the table. But you see what I mean? This is not for the faint-hearted. Look at this book, Old Penn Station. This was the tearing down of the original that was crafted, and gorgeous artisans, when people cared about what they were building and aesthetics and such, right? Torn down so that a Madison Square Garden could be built, right? This isn't just about that. I read this with fifth graders, and we debate economy and power and who had that voice and who decided, and is culture changing now, and do we even care about this anymore? This book, you couldn't even stop. The kids were like, late for gym, we don't care, let's keep going. This book, and first of all, look at the aesthetic of it. Thank you for the gasp, it's like I planted you here. $5 later, $5 for the gasp. But isn't it gorgeous? And it's really about how before urban sprawl, this was a social hub. You had date night in Penn Station. Remember that? Yeah. Date night. How old are your kids? All right. But you see what I mean? It's a different kind of reading. I have to show you some more of these in a minute. Any of you fashionistas? Biography of Coco Chanel. Fabulous. But you know what it's about? It's about fitting in and not, and class. And do you use that class even though you actually judge them to get what you... It's phenomenal. And it's about gender, and it's about voice and risk-taking. That's what this is about. I have fifth grade boys going, are we going to get back to Coco Chanel today? I'm like, oh. Because it's not about fashion. It's about the stuff, the big stuff. Okay, where's my little thingy? So, this is what I hear all the time. Give or take any kinds of stuff, you can put them in any order of sequence that are, that's important to you. I want my kids to love to read and to learn to read well and be interested in what they read. And that second to last, read well enough to do well on assessments, that's a reality. Fortunately or unfortunately, our society has tests, and it's our responsibility as public school teachers and yours as parents to ensure that they perform to the best of their ability in those situations, because fortunately or unfortunately, those situations are door openers or closers. That's the bottom line, and that's unfortunate. The school in which I teach, that Liz mentioned, is it's in Murray Hill in the city. So we have, at any given time, 43 languages spoken. I have a kid whose driver is picking her up to go to her second home in Paris for the long weekend, next to a child who literally is in her third homeless shelter this week or month. And everywhere in between. And you know what? The kids do extremely well. Because good teaching is good teaching is good teaching. Good practice is good practice. So I want to talk a little bit about, these issues. Now let's think about how you teach your kid to do something. It's all about gradual release of control, right? Unless you were one of those people who throws the kid off the dock to teach them how to swim. And did anyone experience that? Remember that? Learning how to swim by being thrown into the pool by an older sibling? That's not the kind that we're talking about. That is one way to go about it. Or the day you came home and there just were no training wheels. Oh, okay. But what we're hoping is that it started with demonstration and the kid analyzing the demonstration, right? Oh my God, total flashback. I can see it. You're having some kind of flashback. Either it's mother guilt or you're having a childhood flashback. I'll let you just sit in it. Okay. So really it's demonstration, and then there is some release of that demonstration. So you're in it, but I'm still here, and you got those things on your arms or training wheels or whatever it may be. there's some in it, and then finally, off you go. And that's not always totally successful. That's just how we teach kids things. And that's exactly how we teach them in school. It just sounds different. So when we teach kids, we say, this is our belief, that's to, with, and by. They need to know what they're striving for by first seeing it. That's why read-alouds, even if they're not novels, they're busy, analytical read-alouds. And those of you, who's got like a kindergartner or a first grader? Even those kids, I'm going to show you some books. You know, Prudence Wants a Pet. How many of you are in that dreaded conversation for the eternity of your lives? Live a dog, whatever. But it doesn't have to be provocative to be rigorous and engaging. This is about a kid who wants a pet, but oh my God. You got to see what she puts her parents through. So she starts like taking like inanimate objects and putting leashes on them and walking around the neighborhood. So like even our little ones are having debates about like, well, she's just trying to have a pet. 6 years old, 2 days ago, says she's trying to embarrass her parents, okay? Because they'd rather have her walk a dog than a shoe when she was walking around the neighborhood. There's big conversations. Frank is a frog, but his dream is to fly. But the problem is he's a frog, okay? And they don't fly, they just don't. But his parents had told him, you can do anything you set your mind to. You realize as a teacher, this is just so much fun. Because then you're like, oh my God. But here's a debate I had 7-year-olds having last week. So should parents always just encourage? Or should they sometimes discourage and say, pick something else? So should he keep going? You know, never give up your dream. They talk in cliches, you know. They talk in cliche things that you buy in like the card store. Or is it sometimes okay to give up and have another? Well, all we hear is how they're raised. Because you've got the one kid that's like, yeah, you know, in my family, so you try something new. You got this other kid who's like, we never give up until we achieve our goals. It's so great. It's who they are. So it's not just a fun book. I bet he will. No, he won't. He will. No, he won't. Aren't you just dying to find out what happens, by the way? He ends up... It's only a short story with paintings. Perhaps you can read it. It's debatable whether or not he flies. See, a baby bird, when he's sitting here all upset that it's not working out for him, and he's all upset with his parents, and you know, they don't believe me, I'm going to do it. A baby bird falls into the pond. He immediately, his instincts kick in. He rescues the baby bird. Mama bird says, what can I ever do to thank you? And he's like, well, you could teach me to fly. And she goes, frogs don't fly, something else? But she goes to get a friend, and they carry a stick in their little bird legs, and he holds on, and they fly. Now, here's a nice conversation to the kids. Guys, you think you should have done that? Well, you hear your parenting right there. No way. In fact, go back. Did he ask his parents? He's flying in the sky. Huge debate. Was that actually really flying? Should he have actually done that? You know, should the mother bird have done that without checking with his parents? There's all kinds of debates. Because the point is, it's not about blow through the book and go, that was good. It's habits of mind, of discourse and debate and using the information in the book to read well. So that's what we do. Show them and read aloud how that goes. Work with them in small groups to make sure they're ready to take it on their own. And then when they're reading on their own, in a thing called Reading Workshop, hopefully, that's what they expect. There, I'll leave that up for 30 seconds. That's how your teachers are teaching reading. And if not yet, I can say that working with the person in the district who's in charge of this, can I safely say, that's the direction. Okay, this is just a balanced framework for teaching kids to read. There are read-alouds. Okay, it's 2 with 5. Remember the swimmies, reading thrown off the deck? It's 2 with 5. We read aloud with them, and we do this work with them like I've been describing in these books, okay? And then shared reading, instead of reading it aloud to you, it's big, it's on the screen. We read it together, much more closer to a level that they can all read. And we do that nitty-gritty of getting stuff off the page. 2 kinds of small group instruction. One is, hey, before you read that next level, let me give you a heads up as to why it's not the current level. Here's these 4 things that make them different. Let me tell you what they are so that your reading stays high quality. Are you with me? That's one kind. The other kind is, hi, hey 4 of you who seem to still not think punctuation is important. Come on down. I don't care what they're reading or what level they're reading on. It's just random needs. This framework makes sure that all kids, okay, and obviously knowing about words and how they work, in the reading workshop, call it independent reading. Please don't call it dropping everything and read, and if they do, I need to talk to your teachers. Reading workshop is where the curriculum is carried. So these Common Core standards that not all the states but most have adopted, yours being one of them, says what your kid needs to be able to do independently when reading. And so in this time, when they read by themselves, they don't just go read. Every day, ideally, when we're getting it right, this month we're studying how to look at characters closely. This month we're studying how to read nonfiction well. This month we're studying how to analyze and interpret bigger ideas. That's all dictated by the standards. And so every month, if we're getting it right, your kids should know what they're studying in reading workshop. Are you with me? And if we're getting all the other pieces of it right, that playing field is fair and equitable for every kid. I don't care what makes your kid different or extra special. They're all, as a citizen, right, supposed to have fair and equitable access to that curriculum when they read by themselves. That's what that framework is about. Are you with me? So you've got the kid who started reading at 7. Next to you is the kid who started reading at 3. You've got the kid who reads so much she walks into trees. And someone else has the kid who's like, don't put that in my hands, it's like lava. Please, I'd rather touch lava, don't make me read a book. And everywhere in between. But here's the bottom line. They have to read well to access that curriculum and present themselves well. Okay, that's their like, literally, it's like a citizen right. So, let's think about this. Conversations like this are defining what high quality reading means regardless of the level of text being read. If the level of text were the only barometer for high quality reading, that would be entirely unjust. If you think about it. That would just be entirely unjust. It would be like, okay, let's not take into account anything that we know about humans and brains and development. So it's not about the level, it's about the high quality reading work. So I often work with groups of special educators, and I have a very special brother, and so I'm always in these conversations. And so when I meet with parents whose children have extra special stuff about them, and all they've ever been told is what that child can't or isn't or doesn't. It's just like that conversation. And I say, my God, she's like doing amazing work. I mean, the way that she brings a conversation to life, because of the way she thinks about relationships is incredible. It's really amazing. I mean, it's certainly third grade work, if not beyond. Now, on her own, she's doing that right now in a material that is lower than what I would like it to be eventually. But boy, is she doing that work. Sobbing. Parents are sobbing. They're sobbing. They're like, what? She's amazing? You mean you know that she's amazing and I do too? It's because the level of text trumps conversations. And it's a barrier. So we have to be cautious about it. You have to be cautious. Ensuring that books mean something to kids, not just going through the motions. Reading to your children straight through elementary school. You're busy. But very often, can't speak for all of you, the second kids learn how to read, we stop reading to them. It's like, whoo, job well done. They're reading over there and we're staring from the kitchen or the front. What are you reading? Tell me about it. But trying to find the time to still read to them, too. You have to see these 5th graders. How many of you have a 5th grade boy? And already jockeying to be like, dude, middle school dude. I'm a man dude, You got to see how they fall in a read aloud. They just fall in. And, all of them, even young ladies who are like, I'm sort of above this. When is, whatever. They fall in, because the read aloud is human. So also, with your children beyond elementary school, hopefully, even beyond. All right. Some of you have that kid, right? And if they're not that kid, they might be that kid someday. I hope they're not that kid. But the problem is that what happens is a lot of kids turn into those kids. They'll read to do school. Across this country in middle schools, kids read to do school. And they can do books, and they can do the thingy that goes with the book. And we really have to be more cautious about that, because you really have to be a very, very good reader in order to pursue any academic or personal pursuit. You really, really do. And then it's not like, oh, I'm going through the motions, time to make the donuts. I'm totally dating myself. Does anyone remember that campaign? First of all, you weren't even born. Right, Dunkin' Donuts, right? Right, he was like, I think sometimes it's like, go through the motions, whatever. The other thing that creates that is, well, at school I have to read this, but mom lets me read this. That's a conversation we have to always go back to. I'm not saying that those should not be opposing camps to a kid. It should be, well, at school, here's what we're doing. and this is why we're doing it. And at home, this is what you're doing. And that has to be an ongoing conversation, so it doesn't become like a boundary. It just becomes a difference. You know what I mean? Different expectations, different set of purposes, or a different place to transfer what you're learning. But try not to make it a boundary. And I'm in those conversations all the time. So there's my messy house. The biggest thing about the mess is that there's books everywhere. And I think after the board book days, the books get put away into tidy places. Leave them everywhere. Coffee tables, in the back seat of the car, everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. I took off the slide because someone told me that it was a bit too much with books by the potty, but there are books by the potty. There is a bookshelf by the potty on the wall. So a lot of us already have this in play, but then it fades. It fades because life gets busy and sports start and whatever it may be. But just a reminder, it's just the bottom line is that they're more likely to pick one up if it's there. I mean, that really is the bottom line. How many of you spend, unfortunately, 3/4 of your life in your car? There's a lot of driving going on, driving to this lesson and from that lesson to pick you up from this and over there and then that play date and this, da-da-da-da-da. We spend a lot of time in our car. Okay, so it doesn't have to be an actual book necessarily. I can't believe the audiobook collection I just saw out there. That's amazing. Don't get the Hunger Games, though. Or 50 Shades of Grey. The waiting list for that is down the block. All right. So, consider the classes. I just listened to Cricket in Times Square with my little ones. It's beautifully narrated. See, the thing is that some of them are not well produced. And just as an aside, 50 Shades of Grey is the worst narrated, recorded. Everyone said, you have to just read it because the voice is annoying. But anyway, it's like find things like that have won Grammys for audio recording. And the Cricket in Times Square is perfect. So just plug it in, listen, press pause, stop. Can you believe the mouse just did that? Listen a little further, stop. What are you wondering right now? I mean, seriously, do you trust Mama Bellini to keep him okay? Just stop thinking, wondering as you're listening. E-readers, Kindles, Nooks, iPads, news radio, put on NPR. Be ready to press stop, or, because every now and then. NPR, whatever news channel you listen to, whatever is important to your family, put it on and talk to kids about it. Same conversation. So what do you think about that? Seriously. I mean, what do you think about this lady kind of fighting for that in court? I mean, do you think she even has a right to fight for that? Does that make sense to you? Talking, it's the same thing. It's the willingness to kind of go, I don't know. I never really thought about it like that. It's that. It's the willingness to just ponder and grapple. Now, I was on a site the other day, Mommy, the sites that always make me feel like a horrible mother. Like the mother is always amazing. Every day it's fresh baked everything, and she knows how to sew, and she's like amazing, and she's gorgeous. I'm like, oh. It's overwhelming to me, her site. But she had a really good blog entry about how her kids love reading. So once I got past her gorgeousness and everything else, her blog entry about keeping her kids reading, she said a lot about just it's a regular part of what they do, and her kids read because of it. In the car, everyone is balancing right now, electronic world and book world. Publishing houses are battling electronic world and book world. It's just something our society is going to, look what's happening to newspapers. It's something our society is going to deal with big picture, right? But everyone knows the electronics. I'm not going to sit here and bash video games. My personal, as a mom, we're pretty light on that stuff, but my kids are young and they're also female, and there is a gender divide in some of this, but everything in moderation, right? So when they say French toast, well, we already had it once this week. So, video games, everything in moderation. I also have a nephew who's 22 who lives with me. My sister had 5 children. She decided I could just take one of them, I guess. It has to be the one that eats like 2 loaves of bread a day, right? Hey, that's a good one to give me. He's a big gamer. He's a big gamer kid. He plays World of the Whirly Craft and all these games that I don't even know what they are. He's a big gamer. And so we just have him balance it, but you also have to, because he also loves books. But if he's not careful, his reading, he will stop reading because of the gaming. Navigate it however you wish. The bottom line is, we're here talking to parents from a school perspective, right? And sometimes kids, that chills them out, whatever. The reading thing, very, very important for them to be analyzing text. And this is the same thing, news, radio, whatever it may be, current events. Those are my kids. That's my husband, and that's kind of it. See, I could have my own blog. I could put a fancy thing up there. Never mind that was the one picture of, no, I'm only kidding. It was only the 5 pictures I ever took of them reading. Reading really is everywhere. Here's how I feel about books. You see it in these conversations. You're raising your kids through this. When's the first time your kid learned about the Holocaust? I don't know. When do you think that that's appropriate? When would you share a book like this? When do you have a conversation with them about, you know what, honey, it's just okay to not be good at something and to give up sometimes. That's okay. Or not, because you don't want them to have. It's raising your kids through books. It really is. It's conversations that come up about life and how they're going to navigate friendships and injustice and everything else from the time they're little teeny tiny peanuts. So we partner with books when having conversations about life. Absolutely the truth. This selection is off-putting when people walk in, because for many of you with a kid who's a certain age and above, they're not reading this kind of book anymore, right? Bookstores aren't the greatest at showing picture books that are more compelling. They show Corduroy and Harry the Dirty Dog and all those gorgeous classics, but then these are just not considered. And if you know your kid's not going to pick it up, then you have to pick it up and we have to pick it up. I mean, even things like this whole series about the building of all this different stuff, the building of the Brooklyn Bridge. The series is by Elizabeth Mann. She's brilliant. She did all this of many, many landmarks in our country, at first New York City. And it's not even just about the bridge. Who was the group in the caissons below? Who was the group that never had to go underground? There's big stuff. You can almost read this book with your kid when they're 6, and then when they're 8, and then when they're 10, and it's a totally different book because of how long they've been alive and when certain things start to become illuminated to them. This could just be about a family who works really hard. This could also be about class, choice, voice, and representation, and economics. And this could also be about societal shifts and what that means for us as a people. And it's been about all of those things depending on who I read it to. Go ahead.
How do you find the right books?
I'm going to tell you something. It's really hard as a parent when you're not like thinking of this stuff. First of all, we can make any bibliography and a list of this for you. What I'm doing very first is I'm trying to always carry in my mind when I read either the frog thing or something like like the Yellow Star. What are some debates I would imagine having with another person? Never mind my own child. What are some debates I would imagine having? What are some of the big conversations that I guarantee people would be divided on? And I'm just looking for that kind of stuff. When am I ready to expose my kid to certain conversations? And it really is. It's like raising kids through these conversations. Your library here, I wasn't even out of my car, and there was already 8 red carpets rolled out for help an organization on anything. It's amazing to me. So something tells me this is also going to be a really good resource, because I'll continue my conversation with them. And I want to go through some more of these too before we go. So let's take a look. All books can spark big talk, okay? Now, know that I'm not the anti-chapter book reader. Like, I have a responsibility as a teacher to ensure that children can navigate long pages of text and lengthy text. I have a responsibility. It's required of them in lots of situations. It's part of the standards of raising them through the grades. But in our read aloud time, if teachers read 4 novels a year, they read 4 books a year. Do you see, in a read aloud? Or if you read novels, and especially if you read it like my mother, I'll never forget. Do you remember reading to your kids when they were little and they were young enough that you could still fake them out and skip pages? That was the worst. I'll never forget the day I tried to do the skipper. I was like, oh my God, it's 8:30. There's definitely a glass of Chardonnay waiting for me on some counter somewhere. And I'm like, oh, and then they all went to bed. I remember my daughter going, Mommy, you skipped. I was like, oh. It's not a horrible model. I'm just admitting it. I'm not saying it was every night. I'm just saying. Then I knew she was a real reader. And bedtime took an extra 20 minutes. All right. So look at those 2 books. Here's a perfect example. Always copy Cub. I picked it up in my kid's book order. You know, it looked cute. I don't know, little boy. Looked like maybe he might be in trouble. And I have one very, very like super compliant little daughter, and I have one who's got that extra little spark in her eye. You know, they just kind of were popped out that way. So that kind of grabbed me. All it is, always copycat, is about a little bear playing hide and seek with his mother. Hardly provocative, right? And every time he hides, he screams, "You can't find me!" And she finds him, obviously. And the kids are like, what? He doesn't get the game, you know? But some other kids are like, yes, he does. He wants her to find him, because every time she finds him, he gets a pickup and a wee and a cuddle. So here's this huge debate. What's his motivation with yelling? He just doesn't get it, or he wants the cuddle? Later in the book, the bear comes up with a decision. He goes across the river, in other words, very, very far away, but I don't say that, and he hides somewhere, like really far away, like he's lost, right? And so he just hides, and I say, so guys, what do you think about his decision? Half of the children are panic-stricken, and the other half are like, yes, he's finally gonna win, right? Huge debate, huge. Couldn't even stop them from talking. And half of them, their teeth were falling out, and you couldn't even understand what they were saying. Okay, but they were like, this is a good thing. She'll never find him. And you're like, that's right, she'll never find him. You know, so this is huge debate. It's just about hide and seek. But it's not just about hide and seek, right? It's just that room to ponder and grapple and defend your thinking. William's Doll is a classic, written in like the 40s. It's a classic about a little boy who wants a doll. Imagine the possibilities of conversation, right? But here's what I'm not gonna do. What you should do, you should tell your kids how you feel about playing with dolls and who should and who shouldn't. I'm not supposed to be the one to tell you that. So I'm not gonna say, don't you think he should get a doll? I mean, do you think? You know, I'm just going to say, guys, what do you think about this whole thing? This whole idea of William and a doll. Turn and talk about it. And some of the kids are like, and some of the kids are like, that's great, you can practice being a dad. His dad brings him a basketball. Do you know the book? His dad brings him everything except a doll. And that's an interesting conversation. Some 6-year-olds, very literal. It's because he didn't say it loudly enough, I don't think. He needs to say it more loudly. Because dads, if he heard him, he would get him the doll. So why isn't the dad getting him a doll is a big conversation. He's embarrassed of him. He's afraid he's going to get picked on. He just didn't hear him. Well, guess what? A few pages later, Grandma comes to town. I don't know what, grandmas have power. All it says is William's grandmother came, and all the kids are like, yes! Yeah! Grandma doesn't have to listen to the rules. I remember the first time my mom babysat for my first daughter. You know, I had like the 12-page checklist and 8,000 emergency numbers, and in case none of those in that restaurant were like, ridiculous, right? She walks in, my mother comes up to here on me. She's just this little ball of her pigtails and her socks don't match. And so she walks in and she looks at this, she goes, anyway, when are you gonna be home? Like, I don't know who this is for. And you know, she's like, if they have Oreos, they have Oreos, it's fine. Older readers, yes, we have a plethora of novels out there. But in this case, more can be more. So yeah, they should be reading that, and whatever grabs them, and they should be reading longer books as they get older, and maybe you should read longer books with them when they're younger. But Cricket in Times Square and Mouse and the Motorcycle, like go to some classics to read with them, because what society wants you to do is read fantasy to them from the ripe old age of 3.5, right? Because once it makes a buck somewhere, let's make fantasy for 8-year-olds, and now for 7-year-olds, and now for 6. Now, fantasy for 3. You know, the fantasy board book. You know, it's an absolutely engaging genre. But if you're just reading it for entertainment value, you're actually missing it, right? They're missing the symbolism, and they're missing the actual genre, right? So hold off on it, or at least everything in moderation. Balance it with other stuff, because in this case, more can be more. Right? Lots of potential conversations here to have with your kids, so that reading is busy. Clancy the Courageous Cow. Whenever I read this, the kids are ready to be silly. It's wrestling cows. Okay? They are ready for this to be awesome. This is a book about everything. I've read it in kindergarten and I've read it in middle school. So the first page is that Clancy's born, And his parents and his herd has these white belts. Can you see it? But Clancy was born beltless. So he's immediately born different. So we usually don't go much past that page, and it says it was a day of great disappointment for his parents, which is like already the kids are like, huh? Like that's heartbreaking. Like what? He's their baby. So there he is. He's ostracized. So you can imagine the conversations. So it's not just about wrestling cows. So I often say to kids, guys, where do you think his parents are? Because it doesn't say. Well, it depends on who they are, and it depends on how old they are. Some kids have big debates on whether or not it benefits the parents to stay there, big picture, versus here. If you're 5 years old, they're always here. They quote, just don't fit on the page. I've heard it. Oh my God, almost every time. Oh no, they're there. They couldn't fit. They had to cut the paper. But they're right over here. Because I'm 5, man, and his mommy and daddy had to be on that side. It's like heartbreaking. So what does he try to do? Conform. Okay. Now, if I want to go cliche, I can say, you should always be yourself. How many of you had a couple of years in high school where you just would have loved a couple of days of fitting in? You know, like, can I just not stand out? It's exhausting for those kids. Some kids could justify why he does want to fit in. But if I'm not careful, this becomes the anti-conformity, be unique lesson. I'm not the guidance counselor, I'm a reading teacher. What this is supposed to be about is, I mean, what do you think, guys, about this whole fitting in thing? Some kids think it's a great idea, and some kids don't. He tries everything, it doesn't work. Well, then you find out, not only is he ostracized in his group, his whole group is the lower class group. Because these, the big, strong heifers, they have rich grass, and they have poor grass. It says rich and poor on it. So they have rich grass, and it's a cycle. Because in order to win the rights to the rich grass, you have to wrestle. But you're already strong from the rich grass. What is this book about? It's about everything. What is this book about? Is it just about wrestling cows? Maybe if I'm 5, or that's not fair, they should change the rule. But there's still a debate. It's about everything. It's about class and the cycle of poverty and economics. It's about all kinds of things. I'm not going to force it on your kids as they get older. So I literally read this to 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds. I've read it in middle school. This becomes a huge issue for them about economics and society and dictatorships and democracy. It's amazing. It's a book about wrestling cows. So anyway, what happens is, it's late at night, you have to get this book. Someone said every time I mention a book, it goes out of print, and now it's like $46,000. I'm like, that's power. That's my own little piece of power. Okay, Oprah, you know, she slammed some sales. I got something on her. All right, so here's what happens. At night, they try to sneak in. Well, that fabulous fitting in white belt gets you seen, so you get kicked out. Clancy goes in and takes the grass, and he doesn't get seen because he's all black and he doesn't have the belt. So the kids are like, yes! I'm like, yes, stealing! They're like, no! I'm like, they're like, but this time, yes. So sometimes stealing. They're like, no! They're all jacked up. What's right, what's wrong, but it's not stealing, he's just making it fair. I'm like, oh, okay, so my neighbor has like a really, you know, a great car. I'm going to take their car so that it's fair. They're like, well, not like that. It doesn't, they cannot stop about, this is really about equity and fairness, but they should just share. I'm like, but it's theirs. They won it. Well, they didn't really win it. I'm like, they wrestled and they won. You can't, they're like beating each other up walking out the door. They can't understand. Why a love connection? Why not? Just because. Just because he meets Helga, because she's also an all-brown heifer in her group, and they grazed together every night. Every night. So what happens is, the president, now that Clancy is big and huge, says, you're going to fight for us. Right? And a good question to kids is, should he? Not will he, because all you have to do is go, hey guys, check out the cover. I think it's pretty clear that he does, and he wins. Okay? Should he? Would you? And you got to hear these kids. No way, I'm not fighting. Yes, that'll be better. All the wrestling moves, and he wrestles and he wins. And then, of course, the cycle's going to repeat itself on the opposite side. Now you get off. Now we're going to be powerful, except he is, you know, stop. Can't be on in peace. And now everything is beautiful and peaceful, and everything's great. Now older kids, all I say is, guys, what do you think of the ending? And depending on their perspective, some of them think it's fabulous, and some of them think it's ridiculous. It depends on how old they are and what they're exposed to. You see what I'm saying? As an adult interpreter of this, I think, ideal. Lovely, Hollywood, not a Cannes Film Festival winner, because in that case, Clancy would have been shot, and like something horrible would have happened. It would have been over, and the credits come on, you're like, oh my God, this is Hollywood. And then, of course, a nice little biracial baby at the end. I don't say that when I'm reading it to kids. And everyone loves to be the nice little biracial baby.
For those listening with biracial children, this is
See,
very
of course! So look! And they named her Klanga. Clancy and Helga. They named her Klanga. All right, so you get the point. We've got to keep these books in your hands because now that takes you 1 or 2 nights. And that's a lot of stuff to talk to your kid about, right? So this is the kind of reading work that we want to do together. Across the alley, again, wouldn't even read it with little kids. It's about 2 best friends, young Jewish boy, young African-American boy, but it's the 50s, and they're best friends in secret across the alley at night. One family wants him to be a ball player, the African-American kid. The young Jewish boy's family wants him to be a violinist. As it turns out, they have exact opposite natural talents. So the young African-American kid, Willie, is playing violin one night. Grandfather says, "Oh, my grandson," and walks in and catches. Not only are they friends, his grandson is not the talented violinist that he thinks he is. It's this other kid whose entire group the grandfather deems not really worthy of much of anything. It's intense. You see what I mean? I'm not going to read that to a 6-year-old. It's not even appropriate. These are the books out there. Remember, they're just short stories with paintings, which is really what they are. They're short stories with gorgeous aesthetic to them. These are the kinds of things that we think about as kids grow older. You can't really be reading anything unless you're reading through these lenses. This comes from a group of folks, certainly Randy and Catherine Bomer, but these are the kinds of issues that we study through. Think about Clancy the Courageous Cow. Every single one of those things was kind of at play, right? I'm just not going to impose it until kids are ready. So, supporting the big picture. Instead of, how was school today? Don't you love that one? Good. What'd you do? Nothing. It's like, really? Come on. Then why am I exhausted? Like, didn't we do something? So instead of those that give you no response, at least in the reading world, hey, what is the book you're reading have you thinking about? What are you thinking about in that book? Is it kind of like you're thinking, not like you're thinking? They're reading for entertainment value, which is okay, but not all the time, because it's not doing academically for them what it's supposed to, based on standards and expectation of what is real reading. Just reading for, it's good, is not the kind of reading that they need to be doing. They need to be like, you know, I never really thought about families the way that this one is kind of going, or, you know, this girl, like, this friend just keeps mistreating her, and she's so forgiving, and I can't figure out, like, if I should be more like that or not like that. That's real reading. It's the big stuff. It's the takeaway, I always say to kids. What's your takeaway? This is a good question to start asking your teachers over time, because this is the work that we need to be doing, is what are you guys reading aloud right now? What are the conversations that you're having? Now, I don't know where the teaching practice is yet, because I only just got to town, but it doesn't take me long to find out and then get busy. But what are you guys talking about? What are the debates? What are the conversations? That's a good question for them. And of course, if they go, I don't know, double check it with the teacher, because it could just be that vortex that happens between 3 and 4:30 in their brains. All right, so here's some takeaway thoughts. Reading with your child is as much about life as it is about reading, for real, from a parent perspective. From a teacher perspective, it's about academic rigor. It really is. But remember my bumper sticker, rigor need not negate joy. They're symbiotically connected, joy and rigor. It's not passive, it's busy. Okay? We all have different things that we read for different reasons. Okay? I'm just going to out myself. People magazine does get delivered to my house. I'm just saying. My name is on it. I'm just sharing. That doesn't define my entire reading life. There's human stories in there. And pretty girls. Pretty dresses. So I get that we read for different reasons. But when we have your kids in school, it's for academic pursuits.